What's good, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the franchise. So, got a few things to talk about today, mainly about the Celtics. I'll talk about some of the other aspects with the other teams, the Red Sox, a little bit of Bruins, not really too much, but there's not too much going on there. Not really any Patriots, but we got that NBA draft lottery, a lot of NBA, basically. Just to sum it up in a short thing for you there. So, to start off, we have the Red Sox. A little bit of a rough patch over this past weekend against the Kansas City Royals. They lose 2 out of 3 in that series on the road. And I get it. You're on the road. It's baseball. You can't win them all. Even like the smaller teams kind of find a way to win these games. But that's in the midst of playing these tough series against these tough teams. Like you have the Toronto series, they're a great offense. Not really so much the Yankees, a little further back, but the Astros here and there. Now you got the Rays. You're on the road in Tampa, and they've already split that 1-1. So you have all these tougher series, and in the middle of that, you get the Royals thrown in there on the road, and now they're coming here. As the Red Sox, after they finish up, I'm pretty sure it's after the Red Sox finish up the 3-game series against the Rays, they have the Royals here, if I'm not mistaken. Or if not, right after, it's that series after that. So to lose to that team 2 out of 3, it's not ideal. It's not the end of the world, but when you don't know what's going to happen against these tougher teams, you really should buckle down and try to really win those games against the lesser teams, because the Royals are just a bottom, they're just 10th or lower in almost every category in the American League alone. So, and there's only 15 teams in the American League. So to be in the bottom 5, that's tough to lose to a team like that. So I know it's, like I said, it's not the end of the world. It's baseball. Anything can happen. They'll get it together, but, they should figure this out. And if they could win this series against the Rays, win this final game tonight, that makes up for it for the most part. But they could have done that anyways and still taken 2 out of 3 at least from the Royals. So it's tough to see that kind of series loss, especially when you send Andrew Benintendi for basically what's amounted to nothing right now to Kansas City, and they beat you 2-3 in a series. So that's really tough. But anyways, like I've been saying with the Red Sox all year, and this is all I've seen, is they need to get a legit third starter. They need to get another legit, not a legit bat, all around bat in the lineup. You don't need another guy like JD Martinez or Xander Bogaerts or Verdugo or whatever, but a guy that can bat 6th or 7th and is hitting pretty well, maybe on a bad team, you can acquire him. He can play first base. I think maybe a left-handed bat at first base would be great, just to give a platoon opportunity with Bobby Dahlbeck, because he needs to learn a little bit more, just based off of what I've seen. Obviously, the power's there when he makes contact, but the contact isn't 100% there, so that's a little tough for him. Other than that, They definitely, I think the most pressing need is a legit reliever. That's where they should put the most star power. Their most resources to get star power is in the bullpen. They could go get a third starter, obviously, like I said, but Chris Sale's going to come back too. And as long as he looks the same, and hopefully he can come back before this all has to be evaluated and determined on what they can trade for, as long as he comes back and looks at least relatively close to what he was off of Tommy John surgery, then all the more I would still go get that third pitcher, especially a righty, but it doesn't need to be a top-of-the-line guy, which is great because Red Sox don't have a lot of resources to send to another team for a top player at a certain position anyways. So these things will figure themselves out. If they don't make any moves, then that's just really a bad look. But I can't imagine they won't looking like a playoff team. It just makes no sense. So, well, in other news in MLB, Obviously, the pitchers are being not targeted, but they're just being checked a lot more at this rate for foreign substances, spider tack, and all that to make the ball move. And this was a whole issue if you haven't heard about it in baseball. Basically, they're saying they're cheating, and it's just illegal substances that they put onto their hats or their gloves or somewhere on them. Some people put on their necks. They basically rub it on their hands. They just smear it on the ball, and they throw the ball, and it does some crazy moves that it otherwise wouldn't do. And it was part of the reason why there was a MLB low batting average in the league this year. So that was really tough to see batting average wise. But I think the crackdown on the pitchers is the right thing to do, obviously. But the other night, there was just a couple of potential altercations where Max Scherzer and Joe Girardi kept requesting the umpires to check Max Scherzer, and it was just he threw his glove down his hat. They checked him a bunch of times, and Sergio Romo on the Athletics, when he was getting checked multiple times, he took the hat and the glove off, and he literally took his belt off and like pulled down his pants and was just like, check everything. And it was just like, oh geez, like that's a lot. But I get the frustration from the pitchers. And Clayton Kershaw, after those incidents, had said that in a interview press conference that if a manager does what Girardi basically did to Scherzer, trying to throw him off his game, because Scherzer was having a good game. If he's trying to throw him off, it looks like that they're stopping the game, they're stopping the production, the movement, the game for the pitcher, the way they're pitching. You're trying to freeze the pitcher, basically, like trying to freeze a kicker when you call a timeout in football. There should be a penalty if there's against the manager or the other team if there aren't any foreign substances on the pitcher. So that's a way to go about it. I don't know if that'll exactly be what happens, but I can see this being exploited by managers to freeze pitchers like that more often, and it's probably going to be more apparent. It happen a lot more often, which is it's unfortunate because you never want to see that. You want to see the best of the best, and especially at that level and with the money that some of those guys are getting paid, obviously. So, and for that to be like the case, I really hope they can figure this out, because I don't want to see players' productions drop off and then freezing these pitchers by the managers, and then the game quality goes down and the time goes up even more. That's the big thing. If you have to keep checking these players and the request of checking the players, if those requests become more and more and more, like the frequency of them is on the rise by these managers, it's just going to prolong these already long baseball games that people complain about. They say it makes the game unwatchable and boring at this point. So it's all a vicious cycle, unfortunately, with the sport. I love baseball. It's one of my favorite sports. It might be my favorite sport. So I hate to see it, but it is what it is. What are you going to do? Moving on. I don't really have anything to talk about the Bruins. Hasn't really been any new news that I can think of on them specifically. The Islanders scored in overtime last night to force Game 7 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know about you, but I hope they both lose. I don't really know. I don't like Tampa Bay. I don't like, obviously, the Islanders. Bruins lost to the Islanders, and they're New York, and I'm not a New York guy, so that's tough to decide who to root for there. Obviously, there's like an aspect where if you want to root for the Islanders, that's like the team the Bruins lost to. So it's like, oh, I eventually lost to a Stanley Cup finalist or the champion. So that's one way to look at it. Or you could just have like all this hatred in the world for the team that you got bounced by in the playoffs and hope that they don't win anything. So me personally, I'm a Vegas guy at this point with the last four teams. No way do I want Montreal to win. After that, I don't know, Tampa and all that. That's really all I have to say. Vegas and Montreal play tonight. That's all I really have on the NHL right now. There's nothing crazy. NFL and the Patriots, not much there either. There's obviously the quarterback battle with Mac Jones and Cam Newton. That's still ongoing. There's really, as I think about it, there's no obviously transaction news. We already talked about the Julio trade to Tennessee, and that's obviously settled now. And that's really it with the NFL. I really don't have anything to talk about. I'm just excited. Fantasy football's coming. We'll be talking about fantasy football, and that's it. Fantasy football will be coming soon. That's all. And if you're excited for that, I'm right there with you, because last year when I did fantasy football, it was one of the more exciting aspects or parts of the podcast that I enjoy doing it more than anything, because I love fantasy football. So to be holding off for it for this long, I'm like itching, like, I'm scratching my neck, and I'm trying to figure it out when to really start this, because you don't want to start it prematurely or it's going to get boring. Not boring, but it's just going to become a headache after a certain amount of time. And I'll have other guests on. I know there's other guests, former guests, new guests, potential guests that want to come on and really talk about that. We'll have a full house at some point, or multiple points for sure, where there'll be, we might do like a mock draft here, maybe on the screen, or just in front of us in general, things like that, rankings and whatnot. It was really fun doing that last year. And sometimes I forget I've been doing this podcast for over a year now. So I had done fantasy football last year. Sometimes I forget about that. So not rambling too much here. I'm going to move on to the NBA, because like I said, there's not too much with the NFL in general to talk about, but there's a lot with the NBA. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the NBA draft order. The lottery was the other night or last night? I believe. Oh no, it was the other night. I'm sorry, it was the other night, and there was a few leaps. There were some changes here and there, but for the most part, it stayed relatively the same, kind of. So you got Detroit at 1, Houston at 2, Cleveland at 3, Toronto at 4, Orlando at 5, OKC at 6, Golden State at 7, Orlando at 8, Sacramento at 9, New Orleans at 10, Charlotte at 11, San Antonio at 12, Indiana at 13, Golden State again at 14, Washington at 15, Oklahoma City at 16 from the Celtics, in a trade we'll be talking about in a minute. 17's Memphis, 18 Oklahoma City again, 19 New York, Atlanta's 20, New York again 21 from Dallas, Los Angeles Lakers at 22, Houston at 23 and 24, Clippers at 25, Denver 26, Brooklyn 27, Philadelphia 28, Phoenix 29, and Utah 30. So, like I said, obviously the 14 in that order there were actually determined the other night. Besides that, 15 to 30 was already set in stone. So to see Detroit get there, I was personally hoping that the top of the draft was all going to be Western Conference, because this is a top heavy draft from what I've been reading and hearing. And it seems like that's pretty accurate. So I was hoping at the very least the top 2 or 3 were going to be only the Western Conference, because you don't want those kinds of potential franchise-changing players to be on a team in your conference, obviously, that you have to see pretty often. It didn't completely work out that way, but it wasn't the worst-case scenario. I'm thinking as a Celtics fan, So, obviously, Cade Cunningham is probably going to be the consensus number 1 pick. He's going to Detroit. That makes sense. And after that, it's kind of the pick that whoever each team wants. Houston, I would say that's That's a perfect spot for Jalen Green or Evan Mobley. But for me, the pick is Jalen Green. That's just me. Number 3, I would say Evan Mobley goes to the Cavs. And number 4, I think Jalen Suggs makes too much sense to the Raptors, and that leaves Jonathan Kuminga to the Orlando Magic. I'm not going to do a full mock draft here, especially because the Celtics don't even have a pick in the first round anymore. But those are the consensus top 5 players. So there you go. And as I'm talking about this, Chris Paul is now available for Game 3 against the LA Clippers, while Kawhi Leonard was previously already ruled out for this game. So that's tough for them. But I'm glad I was able to get that news at this point. So there you go for the Phoenix Suns. But yeah, so the NBA draft, the order's set. The Suns and Clippers are tonight, obviously in LA. Suns are up 2-0. I think pretty much everyone in the NBA is hoping, for the most part, Suns and Hawks finals, outside of the respective cities, obviously. The NBA teams, the fan bases, I think everyone wants to see Suns and Hawks. I'm one of those people. I wouldn't mind the Bucks winning. I like Giannis, so there's that too. But I love Chris Paul, and I'd love to see him finally get a championship, so it's nice to see him playing tonight, obviously, especially against his former team with the Clippers. You know he wants to show out against them. So if the Suns go up 3-0, especially on the road here, maybe the Clippers win Game 4, or maybe Kawhi rushes back or something like that. But if they're down 3-0, I cannot imagine them coming back this time. They've obviously come back from down 2-0 in each of the series leading up to the Western Conference Finals, the first and second round. But this is a different team at this point. Obviously, the last win was a really tough one for the Suns. They had to get that alley-oop with 0.9 seconds to Ayton. That was crazy. I was watching. That was awesome. And the Hawks and Bucks game was really competitive and good too. And the Hawks are up 1-0, so that's crazy. I think that's going to be a lot more of a back and forth kind of series than this one. Especially, again, like I said, especially if the Suns win tonight, it's pretty much over in my eyes. I like all the teams that are left. I know a lot of people don't have, they have their reasons to not like each one of these teams at some certain point for them to not win. But if any of these teams win, I'm happy, because this entire year, as I'd like to obviously address this, I was saying, okay, it doesn't matter. It's Nets-Lakers finals. And obviously the Lakers lost, and then the Nets lost against the Bucks, which was great. I was so happy. And I'm happy I'm wrong. I wanted to be wrong. I really wanted to be wrong. I wasn't trying to make that where I was like, oh, yeah, they're going to win. This is it. It's over. If they made it this far, yeah, that would have been the truth, because I don't think the Hawks would have stood any chance against the Brooklyn Nets, especially if Kyrie Irving was able to come back at some point for this series, and with the way Kevin Durant was playing, who's officially back, first of all. But other than that, I'm so happy that these 4 teams are the ones that are left. I just, I can get behind the Suns. I can get behind the Clippers, the Bucks, or the Hawks. I can be happy with any of those teams winning. As a Celtics fan, as an NBA fan, this is fun. This is awesome. It's not the bubble. It's a legit, I'm not saying the Lakers weren't legit, but this is legit, on the road, fans, everything. So this is great. This is great for the sport. Enough of this, nonsense with the top super team winning every year. Some parity was needed, and this was a great injection of that. I'm so happy that these are the final 4, and these should be 6 to 7 game series. Realistically speaking, I don't know about the Clippers, but these series have potential for that. So this is great. Anyways, moving on to the Celtics. Outside of all this other NBA news, Celtics, we got a lot of news. First of all, the Kemba Walker trade. This is the first thing that happened of the 2 big news for the Celtics. Kemba Walker, I've been meaning to get to this, has been traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. That happened extremely quickly. I did not see that coming before the coaching hire, although it seems like the Celtics had their guy of what they were thinking, even previously before this trade went down. So the Celtics are trading Kemba and the Kemba Walker, the 16th pick, and a 2025 second-round pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Al Horford, Moses Brown, and a 2023 second-round pick. Now, I love this. The only thing that I would have tried to have changed, I'm sure Brad Stevens and I'm sure whoever else was in charge of this trade, putting this trade together, I'm sure they tried it. I'm sure they tried doing a future first-round pick instead of the 16th overall pick this year. But the reason I'm not too angry about that to change it is, one, it was a seamless trade. You were able to finally get rid of Kemba's contract when we thought it was untradeable. Just like Hayward's, but it seems like a lot of contracts are not untradeable after all in this league. You're able to do that. Plus, it's the 16th pick, and what I already said earlier is what looking like a top-heavy draft. The Celtics do not need another Aaron Naismith or Romeo Langford. Oh, I think Naismith is going to be better than Langford, obviously, but they were each the 14th pick in their respective drafts, back-to-back. And this is the 16th pick. As I have seen from the Celtics, they are historically not very good at drafting outside of the top 10. They got the Jays. They drafted Marcus Smart at 6, and then Terry Rozier at 16. I mean, cool. Yeah, that was a good pick. Kelly Olynyk's like the next best one I can think of in the last 12 years. Robert Williams, but he can't stay healthy. That's great and all. They don't need another guy like that. They needed to dump Kemba, and I think this was mostly Kemba for Horford. That makes the most sense. So look at it as the 16th pick and the 2025 pick for Moses Brown and the 2023 second round pick, which I love Moses Brown. I followed him a little bit as much as I could because I just like, looking at some of these players. He's a 21-year-old center. He's 7'2", 250 pounds. He can't shoot, but he's basically a bigger Robert Williams, and he stays healthy so far from what we've seen, and his contract is amazing. He has a 2-year deal with an option, and each year is $2 million, maybe around a little bit more than that, maybe. So he's under contract for a while. He's young, and this is the biggest center that the Celtics have had. Taco Fall, whatever, he can't play. So he averaged 8 points and 8 rebounds a game in 20 minutes on the Thunder. Again, he was given the opportunity. He could show out on the Thunder, but we'll see what he does on a real team. And I think he's a really good prospect, and I'm really happy that they were able to get him in that trade, and I think he's worth the 16th pick. So what this does now that you bring in Horford and you bring in another big like Moses Brown, you have the opportunity to trade a guy like Tristan Thompson and dump that $9 million or $9 to $10 million that he's owed in the final year of his 2-year deal. So now you can add that on to the $9 to $10 million that they already freed up in the Kemba Walker trade, or that they have after the Kemba Walker trade. And now you have almost $20 million right there, just off of 2 potential trades that you could do. And then you can go sign a point guard and have a legit lineup. If you put Horford at the 4, you sign a point guard maybe like Spencer Dinwiddie. There's a lot of free agent point guards this year. A lot of them aren't coming here. Chris Paul's obviously free agent. He's not coming here. Maybe Derrick Rose, but it sounds like he wants to stay with New York. I think Spencer Dinwiddie makes the most sense on a 1 year plus a player or team option for, 15 to 18 to $20 million, whatever you want to give him. It's a 1-year deal, maybe 2 years. Who cares? He's a good player. We'll see. This year shows if he can play fresh off of ACL, torn ACL injury. You put him in that lineup with him, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Horford at the 4, and either Moses Brown or Robert Williams at the 5, and it's just it just looks like a great deal. It makes perfect sense for the Celtics to try to do something like that. So I don't know. They should try pulling something off like that, but the future is looking bright. Like I said, they don't have a first-round pick. which sucks, but what are you going to do? You can't have a first round pick every year. You have to make these deals. You have to give up what you have to give up in order to get these players and to make these kinds of moves. And Horford seems like he's really happy to be back here, which is a great sign for other players, because there was this whole question of, well, should players want to come here? The look for the Celtics isn't great. And that was legit. I don't know if these players were going to want to come here, because there were a lot of talks about Boston. But for Horford to have been the original, the OG, big signing for the Celtics, how many years ago that was, 5 or 6 years ago, and for him to come back and be excited and show it on social media, as long as they don't trade him now, we'll see. But I guess they always could to dump his contract too. I doubt it. But for him to be excited, that's a great sign. Plus, his salary is cut in half next year. It's only $14 million guaranteed in his next year's salary. So that already adds pretty much $14 or $15 million onto the payroll, the freed up salary cap for the Celtics going into next offseason, next year's free agency. And then it makes him easier to trade if you really want to. So you can free up another $14 million. And now you have a max guy that you can go out and sign. And next year's free agency class is supposed to be pretty good. A lot of really good restricted free agents, if they even make it there. But there's some veterans too. And obviously this year we'll see what happens with Kawhi Leonard. But I think he stays with the Clippers, at least for this one more year. But you never know. You never know. It seems like anything can happen in the NBA at this point when it comes to transactions. And thankfully, that's kind of moved on for this year's playoffs, like I said. So that's great. So we'll see what the future holds. I'm excited as a Celtics fan. I'm excited now for the future. This was a great dump. They needed to get rid of Kemba. And I don't care if he goes off. I don't care if he looks like what he looked like in Charlotte all of a sudden back in OKC, because that's what they do. They get these guys that need to be projects and moved on from their previous team, and they bring them in with whatever pick they can get to take on their contract. They look really good there, just like Chris Paul. I mean, he's not going to be like Chris Paul, where they let him to the playoffs in a 4 or 5 seed matchup and whatnot. That's not going to happen, but he might put up 25 points a game because they don't really have anyone else next to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. So don't be discouraged if he does look like that. There's no point. He's probably going to look like that if he can even play. We'll see what the knee looks like. So that's the whole thing with that. And right after that move, the Celtics they hired their coach officially, Ime Udoka, who I had seen. I had learned a little bit about him. He was a Brooklyn Nets assistant. He had previously been an assistant with Team USA. I think it's a great signing. New coach, not someone that's recycled. He's coming from the Nets, obviously. I mean, that's a player. I think that's more of a player-coach team than Steve Nash really being an actual coach, but that's just my opinion. And that's part of the reason why they're not in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. But I heard, obviously we heard the Jays really wanted him here. I think Smart really wanted him here potentially. So you have these players, you have this new coach, you made this trade for sending Kemba away. Things are starting to kind of form for the Celtics in this offseason. There are going to be more moves. They will be made. There's too many big men on this team. Maybe they don't trade Tristan Thompson. Maybe they trade Robert Williams because he can't stay healthy, and you have a replacement with Moses Brown. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? All I know is the future is bright. I think the future is very bright. And it's a great first trade for Brad Stevens, president of basketball operations, Brad Stevens. And there's more to come from here. There has to be. There can't be. This can't be it. And I'm feeling a lot better about them than I did a week ago. I think we all should be feeling a lot better about the Celtics' future than we did a week ago. So that's all I got with them. I'm sure there's going to be more to talk about. There's going to be some guests that want to come in and talk about this as well, and future moves that they're going to want to be talking about. There has to be future moves. There's going to be either a good shooting guard or a good point guard coming onto this team. It has to happen. There's no way around it because they're going to want to be competitive next year and for years to come, especially with these young star players, all-star players that they have. That's just, there's no way around it, and that's the way it is. But that's all I got for now, so I appreciate you guys. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow on the Spotify and the Apple Podcasts. And I appreciate all of you. Appreciate the support. And I'll see you all next time.
Ice on my neck, that's incoming. I'm a pretty boy, I'm stunning. Super speed Sonic, I'm running. Super speed Sonic, I'm running.